Hello, hello, and welcome to the Two Girls, One Ships podcast first convention panel, Decades of Digital Love. Today, we will be talking about the steamy but often obscene history of video game romances. But normally, our podcast, we analyze, rate, and review a specific character from a single game and all that their unique love and romance has to offer. I'm Jennasis, the girl whose motto in life is love, laugh, tequila.
And I'm Virvada, the girl who loves that and loves tits, tats, turians, and tangents. So first, for our presentation, we thought we'd take you through the decades to discuss the general tone of the video game romances in that era, specific games, and major events for video game romance. It's by no means an exhaustive list, because we would be here all day otherwise. And after we get through to present day, we're going to talk about some of the science around video game romance, like how it impacts players, how culture can impact what video game romances are offered, etc. And then lastly, we're going to just briefly talk about where we hope video game romance will go in the future.
But big disclaimer, we swear. We talk about adult themes and openly talk about sex. So if that's not for you, we're not for you. Oh, and also video games. So if you haven't played the games that we're talking about tonight, I'm sorry, but here's your fucking spoiler alert. So we have a long history of romance to talk about in video games, starting back in the early 80s. The earliest was a text-based game on Atari and MS-DOS. The first erotic game was 1981's soft porn adventure from Apple II, originally intended as a coding exercise, but it was released as a game. A man attempts to seduce 3 separate women. It's tame overall, but cringy when viewed with modern eyes. The first visual novel was an erotic title called Lolita Yakuin in 1982, where you play strip rock, paper, scissors. The girl on the blue slide here gets fully nude, pixelated titties and all, but her legs are crossed, so you don't see anything else beyond that.
Yeah. Japan visual novels were the first to develop branching storylines and alternate endings depending on who you chose as a romance option. And during the same era in the 80s, American erotic games were of a different flavor. They were almost exclusively marketed and targeted at men, and some of them featured what we can only describe as sexual assault. Some were good, though, like 1982's Nightlife. It was a Japanese game. It was the first game to have nudity, and it was actually marketed as an educational tool for couples because it featured a menstrual cycle tracker calendar and sex positions descriptions. It was like a game Kama Sutra, basically.
Showed you how to move the different ways.
Yeah. Yep. It was a precursor to the modern erotic game genre in Japan.
Yes, the early 80s, where there was a huge smut boom for games. The Entertainment Software Rating Board didn't exist yet. The ESRB ratings wasn't there. So there was no oversight on game content. And the developers of the adult games focused solely on sex and nudity, not the romance behind it. Such as 1982's Custer's Revenge.
It's not a good game.
Judging from the laughter, you guys all know what I'm about to say about this horrible, horrible game. You run around as a little dude with a giant boner. The object of the game is to dodge the arrows to go and have sex with a savage woman who is tied to a cactus.
Yeah.
That's the goal of the game. In 1983, the game X-Man, not X-Men, very different, was a naked man who got to chase naked women around through a labyrinth. Guess what his prize for getting to the core was? But in 1983, video game market crashed. I shouldn't be saying that happily, but it made it so that way a lot more smut games weren't being put out like this. And it didn't really recover until 1985 when the Nintendo Entertainment System was released.
Mm-hmm. And Nintendo did not like sex or nudity in their games. They wanted to be known as the kid-friendly console. So developers started shifting away from making exotic games and erotic games. There actually were 3 erotic games that were developed for the NES, but Nintendo refused to license them, so maybe you could find them here, I don't know. And then we get to the 1990s, and this was the second smut boom thanks to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Internet is for porn. The rapid growth of the internet gave rise to many, many, many erotic games on PC, starting with 1990s Geisha, which if you haven't heard of that, don't blame you, because I hadn't either. It was made for the Amiga, Atari, DOS. It was like a weird puzzle game trying to make it sexy somehow. Got a couple pictures on the side from that game. But still, the dominating erotic games were visual novels or point-and-click games. They were the preferred medium. Like 1992's Dokusei offered narrative paths depending on which woman the player romanced. But most games in the early 90s were still exclusively for the male audience and point of view.
Mm-hmm. In 1993, Fujitsu released the FM Towns Marty. This weird little known console, but it was the first one to have backwards compatibility. So they did not discourage any form of adult games. Whatever you wanted to play, you could. So the Towns Marty was known as the 90s erotic game console. In 94, Angelique was the first Otome game, dating sims targeted towards women. Otome games are games with a female lead that the storyline is driven towards romancing a male counterpart. Then Leisure Suit Larry. In 1990, it first came out in 1987, but it really picked up with 3 titles in the 90s. The series was rated 85th top time of all time for campy humor and bad puns, and it kept the game going for another 5 installments over the next 9 years. By 96, Leisure Suit Larry had sold over 2 million copies.
It was very popular. 2000s. We've arrived at the 2000s, the early aughts, which at this point, many erotic games were still considered adventure games. One that I wanted to highlight because I thought it was really funny and also a great representation of a lot of these games is called Panty Raider, From Here to Immaturity, where, I know. It was when 3 aliens accidentally got a lingerie catalog from Earth and they stole a man who you played as and gave him special tools to take models' clothes off and said, if you don't take pictures of them naked, we'll destroy Earth. So, yeah. We're still in the era where it's not really about choice. It's more about force. And Japan is still the undeniable leader in erotic games, but some of them were not good. I'm going to talk about 2 that have sexual assault as their main theme. The first one being 2002's Battle Raper. Yes, that was the name. It was a fighting game where when you won, you could sexually assault the fighter because they were only women fighters. And that's the 2 covers on the side here. In 2006, Rape Lay. That one's infamous. It was a game where you played as a sex offender who raped the mom and her 2 daughters. That was the entire game. Like, it was bad. It was banned in several countries. It actually wasn't known about until about 3 years after it came out because someone in the UK wrote a story about it and then it completely blew up. And while obviously we can see what the problem with those games are, they didn't break any domestic laws in Japan. So the studio who made Rape Play, for instance, they were like, what's the problem? It's just a game. And so interesting questions came out from that, like, should all games be made for an international audience? Like, maybe it's just for a domestic market. I mean, it seems obvious to me to not have sexual assault as a plot like that in a video game, but they did it. So we thought it was worth mentioning because it happened.
Mm-hmm. And the Ethics Organization of Computer Software, or the EOCS, in Japan reportedly took steps to further regulate rape games, but their limit of sex-based and erotic games to the national market only was their solution. So now they still produce rape games, but just don't sell them outside of Japan.
Yeah.
And it is a self-governing board. As of 2009, almost 90% of the adult gaming industry is part of the EOCS. For our podcast, I explore the fun of fucking. It's what I love. And in my research, it involves learning about kinks that will never be a part of my personal life. But hey, you do you. As long as it is between two consenting adults. At the core, a rape fantasy is a true submission or a true dominance with another person. It is the highest level of power play. Letting go of control, letting go of the power, holding on to that control, being the one in charge, is the core of a healthy BDSM relationship. When it is prearranged, boundaries are set, and rules, including safe words, are strictly enforced, I get it. I could talk about the rest of this panel about building trust and boundary settings, but no, not today. What we saw in these games are not that. They are straight up sexual assault, and these two girls will never stand for that.
No, I mean, the one silver lining that came out of this game, specifically Replay, was the International Age Rating Coalition. It was formed in 2013, and now most major game-producing countries are a part of that, so it's like a standard rating system for games. And obviously, there's like a lot of juicy ethics questions around that topic, but we are not here to do that. We're just here to talk about digital love and its history.
Mm-hmm. Can we move on to a better, more consensual decade?
Yeah, we could stay in the same decade. There's some good times, as you guys know about these games, I'm sure. Within the 2000s as well, we see game romance mostly in dating sims or other simulation-type games like The Sims, but we got some notable outliers. Most of these game romances are still not targeted or portrayed love for LGBTQIA+ people, or even just cishet women, but one studio that did, and they taught us what romance and RPGs and AAA games could be, is BioWare.
BioWare. The rise of BioWare and foundation of game romance we have today. We cannot talk about video game romances without talking about BioWare. In 2000, Baldur's Gate 2 was their first foray into game romance. It established their romance formula of befriend, earn loyalty, unlock romance option. And it ensures that sex and love come from time and effort, unlike any other game to this point. And then in 2002, Neverwinter Nights came out, which also included romance, even one that affected the overarching plot. Too often, romances are side quests, nothing more. But BioWare changed that. Knights of the Old Republic offered romance that was exclusive to certain characters. You had to be light, or dark, or male, or female in order to get the lover of your choice. So defined players... let me define two words for you. There's player sexual and then defined sexuality. A defined sexuality is I identify as this sexuality type, where a player sexual NPC is going to be I'll romance the main character because the main character is who I'm attracted to. It doesn't matter who I've dated in the past. So defined sexuality, you get a defined sexuality.
And, of course, towards the end of this decade, we see the first installments of Mass Effect and Dragon Age. In our podcast, we also interview game developers and narrative designers, and pretty much every single one of them that we talked to so far has listed a romance from one of these games as the reason they became a games writer in the first place. And when I was 16 and I romanced Alistair, I wanted to be a narrative designer too. He's an amazing romance. And these games were also hugely notable in the fact that LGBTQI plus romances were first offered in an RPG, and interspecies romance, and not to mention interracial. For instance, 2007's Mass Effect offered Liara. She's technically not a gay romance because she comes from the Asari, a monogendered culture. But a lot of people still considered her to be that because she visually looks like a woman. And of course, that got everybody's favorite wet blanket, Fox News, upset. Yeah. You know, they launched this whole thing that was like full digital character nudity. Oh no, man, can't see.
Side boob is not nudity.
Yeah, which was fake news because she did not get fully naked. And that actually was the reason that in 2010's Mass Effect 2, Jack's pansexual identity was erased and she was made to be straight, and Jacob was removed as a bi option and made a straight romance only. So thanks, Fox News, for that. But
Sarcasm.
Yeah, sarcasm. Now we're into the 2010s, and obviously it's impossible to list all the games that include sex and romance, but we've got some highlights on the slide. One of our favorites was 2012's Mass Effect 3, which they actually were notable for offering defined sexualities of an NPC, for Trainer and Cortez being exclusively gay options. We still had our interracial and our interspecies romance as well, which brings me to Garrus. Garrus is probably the most popular romance among femshep players, and Garrus is interesting in that he is basically a velociraptor, so it highlights how friendship and trust make a good romance, not necessarily your physical appearance or your allergen response.
It was that Turian that brought us together.
Yeah.
And if you would like more Mass Effect content, seriously, the best Mass Effect podcast I've ever heard is the Mass Effect Lorecast. Go give it a listen, learn everything there is to know about Mass Effect.
Mm-hmm. There's a co-host right here.
More than just that, I was on it. Yeah. So what I also wanted to know is if Fox had issues with Liara's side boob, what did they say about the Cyberpunk character creation screen?
I hope they didn't see it.
All right, moving on to 2014 with Dragon Age Inquisition. It offers defined sexuality, interracial, and interspecies romances. The Iron Bull's romance story.
It's a good one.
It is a compassionate and well-done portrayal of a healthy BDSM relationship. And again, I could do a whole panel conversation on healthy BDSM relationships, but we only have the one video game where it's happened well, so I only get this one little blurb. We also got introduced to romances that can actually have an influence on the overall game plot, such as Solus and the Llewellyn. In 2015, we had Honey Pop. It's a great game. It's little puzzles, but it's also porn. So, The player can be male or female, but there are only female romance options. 2016 introduced us to Stardew Valley, just like the earlier Harvest Moon games, and it offers romance in the form of marriage and children on a farm. And it stays within the formula of give gift, earn spouse.
That's how it works.
Same-sex marriage is possible because the romanceable NPCs are all player sexual. Then we get to 2016 Persona 5. It is a popular series that blends RPG and life simulation games, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about this one. The romance options are only women, and you play as a high schooler. 4 of these women you can romance are full-grown adults, including one of them, which is your high school teacher.
Whoopsies.
The female characters almost always fall for the player, and it removes the autonomy from their story arcs, and it falls back onto the "you complete me." But the romances in the game are still very popular, so we will be covering it next year.
Yeah. And now it's time for science. Yay, science. So first, I don't even know if you guys can read that. I just had to fit all the things on there. But I wanted to first talk about why we as players enjoy video game romance. One of the main attractions to it, according to scientists, is the invitation to pretend, because it produces stories that are collaborative between the player and the studio, the storytellers. Games are unique in that you can do that. They allow players to provide personal context to their story. Movies use acting, sound design, and editing to convey emotions. Books just literally tell you with words. But games let you feel it yourself. Players are given agency, aka permission to care, because in a way, it's happening to you. And romance anchors the narrative beyond the overarching story. I mean, sure, you can save the Milky Way from the collectors, but if Garrus dies, I'm restarting.
Make that mistake of putting Thane in the vents?
No, don't put Thane in the vents.
The intersection of games and collaborative stories is exemplified by tabletop RPGs. A good D&D GM knows that it's the players that provide the emotional context and character development. The players make the contributions to the story through emotional agency, and this is what distinguishes a participatory narrative, aka a game, from other forms of media. Even silent heroes are assigned context by the player. How many versions of Link exist, and yet he's rarely spoken a word? You can play him as a strategic, making potions, or run straight into battle using swords. The basis for human relationships are conversation and choice. Same with games. Every conversation choice and every gameplay choice comes with a consequence, which leads to player expression. This is a hallmark of an RPG, and why RPG romance can both be emotionally fulfilling and emotionally draining.
Looking at you, Solus. He broke my heart. So next I want to talk about game romance versus in real life romance and relationships. Games are obviously very attractive because there's no rejection unless you're Solus. There's no useless dates, putting yourself out there with apps, risking death or violence even. It's a completely safe way to experience love now, not back in the 90s. No, Custer's Revenge, none of that, no. And we role play more than just as our avatar, because you can role play your relationship choices, the types of relationships you're interested in, and different situations. Romance and love amplifies the gaming experience and gaming mechanics. For instance, in 2015, a game came out called Fire Emblem Fates. And you had romance and marriage, you could have children, and it was interesting because depending on who you chose as the parent of your children, it could affect their stats as fighters. So you could help out your battle strategies with selective breeding.
I am not gonna tangent on breeding kinks right now. But game romance can also help to create character investment. Life is Strange, Max, the player character, can rewind time, and she tries to use it to save her best friend, Chloe. But you can also choose to romance Chloe, making the end choice to save her or save a whole town even more difficult. Hundreds of people or your true love. While romances in games are limited, it still enhances the narrative. Even the overall game is enhanced. Other features of the games that might become buggy or frustrating can be overlooked with a good romance narrative. Players view narratives with romance extremely emotionally effective. sometimes to the point of emotional exhaustion, despite also being fulfilled and emotionally attached.
Once again, back to Solus. Dragon Age Inquisition, for example, because Solus's romance is very plot heavy, to say the least. Spoilers, if you haven't played it. Secretly, Solus is a major plot driver. He's the reason the entire drama is unfolding in Thedas. And if you want more lore bits about Dragon Age, check out our friends' Dragon Age Lorecast. And the romance, if you play Solus as your romance, his dialogue is different than if you make him hate you. He obviously comes off as such a douche if you aren't friends with him or even romance him. So you get like a completely different feel for the character. You get a more vulnerable and open Solus, slightly more open Solus. It's not like he comes out and is like, I'm Venhero. You know, that'd be nice. But contrary to assumed motivations for why people pick romances, Solus doesn't have any of these things. He doesn't have a sex scene. He has very little romance cutscenes. And no matter what you do at the end, he breaks up with you. People would assume that you choose a romance because they're hot or they have a really great romance story. Not Solus. And yet, anecdotally anyway, people think he's the canon romance. I kind of could make an argument for that. It's a beautiful but excruciating experience. And it's plot important, and I hope it has some effect on Dragon Age Dreadwolf. I better get some closure. It's a sad ending, but honestly, it does realistically mirror most in real life relationships. I mean, most of them end, so I guess it feels realistic. And another way that romance can really affect the game isn't necessarily through these big sweeping, big amazing moments. It's also just small moments, which we like to call mundane moments. One of my favorite examples of this is 2016's Uncharted 4, because I'm sure everyone's played it. I hope you have. There's a moment in there where Nate and Elena are playing Crash Bandicoot from 1996 in their house. Also Naughty Dog. That was a cute Easter egg. It's a small moment that offers a peek into their life because you see them doing dishes, eating dinner, you can walk around their house and see laundry in the hamper, pictures on the wall, see the life that they built. There's no action, there's no fighting, there's no near-death experiences that mark Uncharted otherwise. It's just a little snapshot of their marriage. But it's a beautiful moment. And it's especially poignant at the epilogue when their daughter's playing Crash Bandicoot. It's amazing. I love that.
A relationship is built off of a million mundane moments. But I also want to know, you love it when you are betrayed by Solus in your romance.
Yeah.
Why can't I love Anders?
I don't know. I didn't say you couldn't love him. I just don't understand why.
And I don't understand Solus.
He blew up the chantry, I know.
Solus chops off your fucking arm.
He did it to save you.
And Anders did it to start a war that I was supporting. So there's that.
Oh boy.
In society and culture, romance can bond people in real life. It's while we may not agree on Dragon Age, we damn sure agree on Mass Effect. Speaking of Mass Effect, who here has immediately asked who they romanced when you hear a friend has played Mass Effect?
Yeah.
'Cause those are the big questions that you ask. Did you save Ashley or Caden? Who did you romance? And what ending did you pick? So, player choices are always the most fun to talk about. It's an emotional entry point to relate to one another in a gaming community. Studies have spoken that both men and women, but realistically all genders, love romance in games and in general, because romance leaves a lasting impression on players. It influences players to desire to be a positive force within the game narratives, even if only to help their romance out. Save Ash because you loved her, or giving Bull what he needs to cope with emotional trauma. Romance adds to a player's sense of presence in the game world, and it helps to add more context and realism. For example, my canon femshep is a sentinel that romanced and saved Caden on Vermeer. but then left him for Garrison 2 and 3. And I chose the destroy ending.
I did too.
Game romance plays a very important role in real life as well. Notably, how you can experiment with sexuality. How many people questioned their sexuality when they first met Liara, or Zev, or tested what it was like to kiss someone? If you were 16 and had never had a boyfriend or a girlfriend before, maybe Caden was your first kiss. As we've said, it offers safe ways to test the waters or to role-play different parts of relationships. But then, if it becomes too much, or not enough, or the wrong choice, just save scum.
Yeah. And also another genre of games that's really good for strengthening romantic bonds between your actual human companion is MMOs. Because, I mean, unless you are addicted or like playing in excess and your partner doesn't want you to play too, that can cause a rift, but partners who play together stay together. MMO creates team building because you're working towards a common goal. It strengthens communication. It strengthens communication and shared intimacy by discussing your personal lives and chats, concerns whilst you're playing. I'm sure everyone's joined a voice chat, just a bitch, right? And you can role play and leave the mundane world behind for a little bit. It's a great catharsis if you've had a bad day. At the end of the day, you go play some MMO. And games also provide role-taking. Role-taking is a social psychological concept, which is when it facilitates social cognition by growing the ability to empathize. And usually you hear it in regards to children, but games do that too. Like, you put yourself in someone else's shoes, literally, when you're playing. And as we've said, bonding over who you chose as a romance is almost a rite of passage amongst gamers at this point.
So, where do we hope the future of video game romances goes? Well, RPGs are uniquely positioned to offer the best of video game romance because they have intense world building and leaving romances more impactful on player emotions through connection. Overall, we are fans of defined sexualities for NPC romances. And defined sexuality, or no. You pick up?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes defined sexualities are called gender-locked options rather than player sexual. And we like defined sexualities because they give NPCs agency and make them feel more real. And it deepens the emotional outcome of a romance. We would also like to see more variety in romanceable characters, like with sexual identity. Bring in the full spectrum, guys. It's 2022. We'd like to see more gender expression, like make it mean something. If my Sims can choose they, them pronouns, why can't my next PC player character, like in an RPG? This is her part, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. For fans of the two girls, they know that I have somebody very special who, if they call, I pick up the phone. So, where were we at?
Race.
Next page, got it. Race. Please, for the love of all things pixelated, give us more racial diversity in skin tone and hair choices.
Yes, please.
And religion. It plays such a small role in video games, but such a large role in real life. You know, and species. Please give us naked Turians. Or a dwarf romance in Dragon Age, for that matter.
I know. And romance storylines shouldn't be side quests necessarily. Maybe sometimes, but not all the time. We'd like more nuance and just more content. I don't want the sex scene to be the last time you ever have any kind of emotional conversation with your choice. It should include more romance past the scene. I would also like to see more romances that are established, like in Uncharted, where you have 3 or 4 games that their romance develops versus just one. And I also would be interested to see more chaste romances, like Solus is obviously a hit, so that would be interesting. And I like more impacts on plot with romance because it makes it feel just that much more important. But ultimately, what's important is having good chemistry between characters, whether that's between the player and NPCs or even two NPCs. Because if you don't romance Tally and Garrus, Mass Effect, for instance, they will romance each other. And even though you only see that happen one time, you walk in on them and it's a super cute little scene, it just makes it feel more real. Like if you were actually Commander Shepard with your squad, somebody's gonna bone. Like it's, you don't have those kind of stakes and not have those kind of emotions. And friendships count as well, of course, because bonding characters creates realism. It makes the player feel more involved, and that's why we play games, right? We want to be somebody else for a little bit.
And this brings us to the end of our panel. So, if you've liked what you've heard today, please be sure to subscribe to Two Girls, One Ship wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find me on the Cyberpunk Lorecast with my other co-host, Toasty, where we bring you the foundations of the past, the state of Night City today, and news of the future on everything cyberpunk. And come give the girls a follow on all the social medias and on patreon.com/twogirlsoneship. You have to follow the link directly. You cannot search for us on Patreon because, according to them, we make adult content.
Like that kind. Like adult content.
No, we make content for adults, which is different from adult content.
Yes.
But they can't differentiate that.
No, they cannot.
So links are available on our link tree, and we have a little QR code to hand out later on.
Yeah. And we also have our own Two Girls, One Ship Discord server where we nerd out regularly on all our favorite CGI significant others. So be sure also to check out our live streams on Twitch on Wednesdays and Fridays at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, or you can watch our YouTube videos a few days after those streams. And our podcast episodes release on Mondays because you need at least one good thing on a Monday.
So thanks for listening, and remember,
beauty's in the eye of the controller. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we will totally go do the autograph session after that, and we can hand out the cards and all that.
We have 5 minutes if somebody has a question, too, right?
Sure.
This is in regards to Mass Effect 2, and to be completely honest, did you romance more to get the game over?
So I've done it once just because, well, okay, so the plan is to do it. I'm currently doing a Bro Shep run that is pro Cerberus, and so he's just going to be like, Samara, no. Samara's going to die, and I'm going to get a Morinth ending.
Of course. Does anybody else have a question before we end, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you that one.
Ooh. So, like, the first when you said that, I really wish that they had developed, not Waka and Lulu in 10. Oh, Chappu. I wanted to see a little bit more between Lulu and Chappu before he died. But I'm a Lulu fan. I cosplay as her. I'm wearing her necklace and her earrings here tonight, so, you know. I don't think that I've played enough of all of the Final Fantasy games to really be opinionated on that one. But I've played a lot of 10 and 10-2 and 13. So
we're going to cover them someday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And wait, I'm sorry, you first, because you had your hand up before. Yes, back there.
Clearly, I've already covered Cyberpunk, I guess, in a different podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to know kind of overall, how do you feel about the diversity of the choices that we actually get in Cyberpunk?
We wish that there was more than 4, but we love that they are all people of color. We also wish that there was a little bit more flexibility in their sexuality choices, because lesbian, gay, straight. It's like, we have to allow one for every type. It's like,
And also, I wish they would debug River.
Yes.
Like, please. So, yeah, I'm sorry, now you go.
I was wondering, Jennasis, I was wondering if you had played Lady Killer in a Bind, and if so, what you thought of it.
I have not, but I'll take that one down and add it to the list.
Lady Killer in a Bind, it's made by Christine Love of Love Conquers All Games. It has a lot of BDSM in it.
You will like that.
I will definitely add that one to the list.
Yeah, on our podcast, she's the sex scene breakdown, and I'm the romance breakdown. So, yeah. We only have, like, what, 2 minutes? Oh, you got... Oh, 4? Oh, sorry. I guess the counter's messed up. Anyone
I was
here?
just going to ask, did you guys play the Boyfriend Dungeon?
Yes!
Yeah, she is. I think, did you stream that one?
No, I haven't streamed it. It's on the list to be streamed because it's a game I've already completed, so to dive back into it would take a minute. I fucking love Boyfriend Dungeon. Are you kidding me? That game has no right being that damn good.
It's good.
Yeah. I was hurt so badly by one of the characters, and now I can't remember his name. So,
Whoops.
no, I know.
I haven't played it. But
I completely
I aim
blocked him
to.
from my mind.
If I'm not writing, I will play it. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know if you guys have played it, but what do you guys think of It Takes Two?
Oh, I don't know that one. We got to take that one down, too. Have you played it?
I have not played it, but I've heard of it. It's a zombie game, right? No?
Wrong game.
Think about a marriage that is splitting apart.
Oh, that's...
Work back together.
Well, that sounds right up my alley.
Two-player co-op game.
Oh, is that the one that you asked me to play?
That's the one I recommended to you, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you guys play it.
Sorry, I'll also let you guys know that Mr. Jennasis is here in the crowd tonight. So, and I say tonight because we always record at night, so it's like what, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
4.
It's 4. All right.
I don't know
it's
what
not
time it is.
5, so therefore it's not tonight. Yet.
But yeah, I mean, I guess if no one has any other questions.
Oh,
Just kidding.
It seems like a lot of relationships and games kind of break down to like dialogue trees or kind of like simple interactions, like getting a gift, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think like is there more on like the gameplay end? Do you think that could be done to more, I guess, better accurately simulate like what a relationship is like?
I mean, I actually really liked what they did in Cyberpunk, where you could text you could text a bunch of people, but I really liked how they expanded that, just little things like that. I know it's also dialogue, essentially, but it felt different because it was through text and they responded, and I wish there was more of that. And as far as gameplay, I'm sure a game has done this, but I mean, it could just be, rather than just a plot change, it could also be like a bonus. It's easier to sway this person to your cause if you've romanced this person, or there's so many different ways. It's not ever going to be like real life romance, but I think there's definitely ways to make it more than just give gifts, marriage. You know, I do like the way BioWare does it the best. I think we're pretty biased about that. The CDPR is doing it too. They're doing a really good job.
For me, I think my favorite one of that was Andromeda, because I love relationship building with the rest of my squad mates, but I also don't want to be ninja romanced and get locked in because I was nice to Caden too many times in the beginning. So with Andromeda, you got to pick a little heart emoji, and that was like, I'm actually offering you love, not just healthy relationship building.
Like, whoops, I flirted with you. Like I accidentally romanced Blackwall.
No. But I think we are out of time.
Yeah, we're
my
out of
love.
time.
But we will go hang out in the autograph room, and then if you punching mics again. But thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and to the right are the playlist of the Portland Retro 2022 and some other interesting videos. Thank you.